I've been playing a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 lately, and it got me wondering, why aren't there any Street Fighter 3 characters on the roster? The Street Fighter 3 games were really struggling in arcades at the time, and Third Strike wouldn't gain true mainstream recognition until Moment 37 went viral 5 years after the game released. So it seems really odd that Capcom passed up this chance to put one of their new Street Fighter characters in Marvel 2 and get the SF3 game some free promotion. You could argue they didn't do this because Street Fighter 3 was struggling and the new characters were seen as weird, so why bother? But on the flip side, it's a prime opportunity for self-promotion. Capcom would end up doing this exact thing when they put Yun in CVS 2 not long after. Plus, the Marvel side of the roster is already weird enough. The freaks of Street Fighter 3 won't seem out of place on a roster also hosting Shumagorath and Blackheart. Hell, even the Capcom side of the roster had its fair share of weirdos. A Mingo, Anakaris, and Jin, who has a predisposition to strip down to his underwear mid-fight. This would have been the perfect place for the weirdness of the new Street Fighter 3 characters to make all the sense in the world. The final entry of Street Fighter 3 came out in May of 1999, and Marvel 2 wouldn't release until February of 2000. There would have been enough time to implement characters even from Third Strike if Capcom wanted to, assuming they'd replace other characters on the Capcom side. So let's take a look at some new characters from Street Fighter 3 that should have made it into Marvel 2 and how they could have been implemented. As for who they could replace on the Capcom side, I'm thinking Sakura, Guile, and Roll would all be good choices to open up roster slots. Nash gets to keep his spot over Guile as the Sonic Boom character because there's already enough SF2 characters and the Alpha series needs the representation. But at the same time, Sakura gets cut because MVC2 already has 3 Street Fighter Shotos that play pretty similar to her. Then Roll gets cut because she's not nearly as funny as Servbot. With a few spots now opened up, who are the Street Fighter 3 characters fighting for a place on the roster? Of the 14 new characters introduced in SF3, I'll be looking at 12, Q, Ibuki, Dudley, Oro, Urien, and Makoto. So that means no Yun, Yang, Sean, Alex, Hugo, Remy, Necro, or Elena. Pitch your ideas for them in the comments below. Now, when looking at how a character would fit into Marvel 2, we can't just pluck them out of Third Strike and dunzo, they're ready to go. When it came to Street Fighter 3, Capcom had a very good way of balancing what they thought were the strongest moves of any given character. In SF3, the super you choose determines the length of your super meter and how many stocks of it you can hold. Ryu's a great example of this. His Denjin Hadouken only holds 1 stock in Third Strike because it's unblockable and does a ton of stun, whereas his Shinku Hadouken holds 2 stocks because it is blockable and doesn't have any secondary effect. Marvel 2 has a similar mechanism to this. Every team can stock 5 bars of meter, but to balance out some of the supposedly stronger supers in the game, some moves require multiple bars of meter. Sakura's actually a good example of this. Her Dark Sakura transformation takes 3 bars of meter to do, the same as a Team Hyper combo. Why did I take all the time to explain that? Well, because Urien exists. Urien is one of the stronger characters in Third Strike and is infamous for having some of the most rewarding combo routes in the game. This is thanks to his Aegis Reflector super, a wall of psychic energy that helps Urien create unblockables and brutally damaging combos. He does have 2 other decent supers, but you'll never see them because Aegis is too good to pass up. For that reason, Aegis would be a level 2 super, and even that sounds risky. Basically, I don't want you to be able to put up 3 Aegis Reflectors at the same time, but given the power of assists, even 2 might be too much. Urien can put up 2 Aegis Reflectors in Third Strike, but that's a one-on-one game where you're not also worried about Tronbon drilling you into one of them while Urien improves his positioning. On the flip side, Urien now gets to make use of the incredibly named Tyrant Slaughter and his Temporal Thunder projectile super, both of which would be level 1s and have more utility in a team game where they can now supplement the lack of Aegis while also being supported by assists. I could absolutely see Temporal Thunder being used as part of some nasty corner loops, and Tyrant Slaughter is basically the same as Juggernaut's Head Crush. Urien's assists would be Charge Tackle, the angled version of his Fireball, and his Claw Grab. I like the idea of his Claw Grab letting the user hit their opponent out of it, like Urien is holding them up as a target. Now, while Urien is a staple of high-level Street Fighter 3 play, 12 certainly is not. The issue with 12 in Third Strike is that he does no damage. Now, while that seems like a horrible character to add to Marvel 2 of all games, the mechanics at play here would help that aspect of 12 immensely. When making Third Strike, the team at Capcom seemed very nervous about making a character with extra movement options. It's likely for that reason that in exchange for getting an air dash, 12 got no combos. Seriously, for those of you that don't know, a lot of the time, 12's best punish for putting himself in good position is Universal Throw. He's that combo anemic. But that's not really an issue in Marvel 2. The Magic series lets any character have combo routes because of how it lets you cancel weaker attacks into stronger attacks. If you'd like to learn more about why I love this type of combo system, I made a whole video about it. Then in regard to 12's added air mobility, that's a given in Marvel 2. 12's air dash wouldn't be any more brazen than say Blackheart's, and certainly wouldn't be competing with Fly State characters like Sentinel, Storm, or Doctor Doom. Marvel 2 feels like the game 12 should have been made for, and that becomes even more apparent when you look at his list of supers. 12 normally picks his Needle super in Third Strike because it has some range, gives him a good amount of meter, and is one of the few things he can actually combo into. But imagine his X-Flat super, almost never used in Third Strike, in a game like Marvel 2 where the majority of the combos are done in the air. In this new context, that super becomes a great combo ender, whereas you'd never be in position to land it in that way, or at all, in his original game. Then because it's Marvel 2, there's gotta be a glitch somewhere. Could you imagine if X-Copy worked like Juggernaut's power-up glitch? 12 turns into the opposing character, then gets to stay as that character if he switches out, and even gets to use their assist. Let's say that switching back in resets the timer on the super. The return to normal animation would still be horrendous for 12, but now you could play around when that happens, while also supporting it with assists. Putting 12 in Marvel 2 would fix nearly every aspect of him. Instead of being useless in Third Strike, this version of 12 seems like he could be pretty damn good in Marvel 2, on the level of someone like Psylocke or Tronbon. As for his assists, let's say Axe, Needle, and his dive special. Now for all the Street Fighter characters that have gotten shine in the Versus games, we've never seen either of its boxers on the Team Fighter stage. Dudley may seem a bit too human for a game like Marvel, but I'd still be really interested to see how he handles in an arena like this. Dudley is basically the only character in Street Fighter 3 that you'll see consistently getting lengthy meterless juggles, which he uses for incredible corner carry and great damage. Being a boxer, he's also really good at poking and whiff punishing, and he uses his Rose Taunt to keep the opponent guessing as they're waking up. The only downside with Dudley is that he lacks any projectiles to fight from afar or contest other projectiles with. This is much less of a problem in the Street Fighter 3 games where fireball wars aren't really a thing, but you would have to take that into serious consideration when playing him in Marvel 2. Every character in the top 15 has some kind of projectile that will stifle Dudley's attempts at approaching, and Dudley has no secondary movement option that will help his approach from long range. But despite that, Dudley could still easily have a strong place in Marvel 2. Just look at Cammy, one of Justin Wong's favorites. She, like Dudley, is fairly quick, focused on rushdown, and lacks both a secondary movement option and a projectile. So Dudley lacking those options isn't nearly the death sentence in the more hectic Marvel 2 that some would initially assume. As for his assists, Machine Gun Blow is a given, then he'd also have Crouching Heavy Kick and Ducking Straight to round things out. Crouching Heavy Kick as a low-hitting launcher would make for an incredibly unique assist. On to Ibuki, perhaps the easiest character to move into Marvel 2. Ibuki already has a variety of Magic Series type combos in her native game thanks to her target combos, and wants to play at the rapid pace that Marvel leads to at high levels, with her focusing on difficult to predict mix-ups. She's also accustomed to fighting in the air, with a variety of air target combos, an air projectile, and an air throw. One of her biggest weaknesses in Third Strike is that she doesn't have a great super. She had one in New Generation and Second Impact, but they took it from her in Third Strike, making that game the worst of the three. She mainly picks her SA1 because it gives her more meter to play with than the other two, not because it's all that great on its own. SA1's biggest strength is actually how much chip damage it does, making it a great closeout tool. This would also make it a good super in Marvel, where chip damage is even more important. With the way Marvel 2 handles meter, she'll now also be able to make more use of her other two supers, a very damaging command grab, and a hard-hitting, combo-friendly slashing super that would be perfect for DHCs. The only reason she doesn't use the latter as much as she uses her SA1 is because of it letting her stock less meter. With meter no longer being a concern, Ibuki might go back to being one of her game's biggest threats, similar to how she was dominant in Street Fighter 3's first two iterations. If they reintroduced her original SA3 as a fourth super in Marvel 2, she could easily end up as one of the most common non-god tier characters. Her one issue is that she has low health, but if Strider's anything to go off of, a quick ninja with a lot of ways to mix you up can be really successful in Marvel, and Ibuki would likely have much lower execution requirements. As for her assists, a variation of air kunai feels like a given, then I'd want her slide grab as a low-hitting launcher and finish things off with some variation of her spin kicks. Next up is Makoto, who faces the same issues Dudley did, but with the added handicap of having a considerably slower walk speed. She makes up for it by having a great dash, but dashing is more committal than walking, so it's still not ideal. On the flip side, she's even more of a damage demon than Dudley and has a very good selection of normal buttons. Makoto has two incredible supers in Third Strike that she'll now be able to use interchangeably mid-match in Marvel 2. Goranzuki and Tosunami fight to be chosen by Makoto players in Third Strike because each brings with it a ton of damage, Goranzuki at the end of combos and Tosunami in the middle of them. If you've ever seen a Third Strike combo video, it probably included a Tosunami combo. On the right character, most often being Akuma, she can do 100% combos off a pair of Tosunamis. Makoto is a bit unorthodox in how she wants to approach things in a one-on-one setting, built more on hit and run than a character in her hard-hitting mold usually is, so I'd be interested to see how she'd function in a team setting, especially if any of her Magic Series routes let her combo into Karakusa. That's a place she'd be helped a lot. Makoto doesn't have many combos off just her normal buttons, so the Magic Series would likely add another layer to Makoto's brutal damage output. It would also make her flying axe kick a lot more useful, now having a place as an air combo ender. As for her assists, her dash punch is obviously in, as is Karakusa, then rounded out with her forward 3 heavy punches command normal. Up next, Oro, arguably the most fitting character from Street Fighter 3 to be transferred into a versus game. Oro has a lot of things going for him when trying to figure out how he'd transfer over. He's the only SF3 character to have extended air combos thanks to his great launching medium punch and his air chicken stomp, which play nicely alongside his double jump. When he isn't getting in, Oro can do a good job of keeping you out with annoying lengthy pokes and a sonic boom flash kick combo, able to alter the angle of his fireball depending on the strength of the button. Then we get to his supers, Oro's strongest feature. His damage output can get pretty absurd. His SA2 floating fireball lets him create unblockable situations and looping pressure, while his Tengu stones act very similar to Strider's Ouroboros discs and let Oro just crank out damage. Throw in the EX version of his SA2 as a level 1 air super, and now Oro also has both an incredible air combo ender and a way to do huge chip damage. Throw all of those things together and you have a character built for Marvel 2, with extra movement options, the ability to hold his own at range, a pretty seamless air combo game, and a damage output that could likely rival anyone on the roster. Looping Tengu stones, looping orb, those both sound like infinites waiting to happen. As for his assists, chicken stomps, his command grab, and sonic boom. Last on the docket, we've got Q, Capcom's own metal mask wearing psycho to rival Dr. Doom. Q fascinates me in this context as his biggest gimmick plays into something near completely unique to Street Fighter 3, taunts having secondary effects. In Q's case, his taunt is crucial to his gameplay as it buffs his defense. After 3 taunts, Q is taking 40% less damage than his base version, which could absolutely be a boon for him in Marvel 2 where you're constantly getting chipped by something. The problem is, taunts aren't really a thing in Marvel 2. They exist, but they're done using the select button and are purely aesthetic. If you were going to adapt Q to Marvel, you'd have to make his taunt an actual move, maybe a little get off me tool with upper body invincibility. If they do that, Q becomes really interesting as the only character who could buff their defense for an entire match. Now in Third Strike, Q suffers from a bit of 12 syndrome. He's not damage anemic by any means, but he can't combo off any of his low attacks or his light buttons. This is another instance of the Magic Series giving a character something they just did not have in Street Fighter 3. Once you get past that problem, Q is actually pretty strong. He's got a slow but powerful command grab that launches the opponent for big damage off his dash punches, and comes with a pair of supers that should fit just fine in Marvel 2. Combine that with his ability to raise his own defense, and Q might have a case for being up in the higher tiers of Marvel 2. He would basically be a better version of Juggernaut, swapping out higher damage for the ability to just eat hits once he's gotten off 2 or 3 taunts. They both lack secondary movement options and projectiles, but Q's buffs would be way easier to work with, as they wouldn't require that he first switch out to keep the buffs activated. They would just always be there. As for his assists, let's go with his dash punch, scratches, and deadly blow grab. It's a good collection of assists that let Q play a variety of roles in this spot. And those are all the Street Fighter 3 characters I'd consider adding to MVC2. As for who would take the 3 open spots, I'll go with 12, Oro, and Ibuki. But who would you add, and which of these characters do you think would fare the best in MVC2? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. But if we're being honest, Capcom would have just added Yun as the rep and left it at that.